Michael Horn, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. You are the de facto #1 spokesperson for Billy Meier, the Pleiadian or Pleiadian. We'll get into what the difference is between those two terms and what it signifies. Extraterrestrials who either, well, some confusion here, do they come from the Pleiades or from beyond the Pleiades? We'll need to clear that up, among many other things in this interview, which I'm sure will be fascinating. Just a quick little disclaimer I want to get out, which I'm probably going to be doing on all my shows now. Now that I can't monetize on YouTube, I want to make it clear to all my guests that I will upload my interviews first to YouTube on the Nature of Reality Radio YouTube channel, and then I will upload them to my CaseL page. CaseL is a page where you can actually monetize using blockchain cryptocurrency based on how many people watch your videos. So please, for the sake of getting me a view count on YouTube, only watch my YouTube video interviews for 15 seconds, and then I will make sure that I put the link to the Cause.tv interview. Please click on that and watch it on Cause.tv. The first few people who see it on YouTube, it won't be available on Cause.tv because a little time's going to overlap before I can upload it there, obviously, but that's it's going to be out there. So please, listeners, if the interview is on Cause.tv and it says so in the description, please listen to that instead of the YouTube one. And I can only upload Cause.tv videos for 1 hour max, so I'm going to have to divide it into at least 2 parts. So with that being said, Michael Horn, I've seen you at least 2 conferences that I am aware of that you've spoken at, and you've given your take on what Billy Meier has to say. The one thing that really, really made me want to get you on the show was the fact that you said, maybe it was 2 years ago, or yeah, I think it was a conference 2 years ago that I was at, that I heard you, where you pointed out how Billy said, I don't know what year he said it, but there would be it was a recent prophecy of sorts, that the United States of America would fall into a civil war, and that is definitely apparently going on now. And the word on the street among those in astrology, and other fields too, for that matter, is that America is going to, up until now, until the April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse, which is going to crisscross America, that eclipse is supposed to signify the fall of the Roman Empire of the modern era, that is the United States of America. And while we may be in a civil war now, the word on the street among some people is it's going to actually turn into more of an American revolution as the next few years go on. And then America, the Roman Empire of the modern era, will collapse, and the world is going to be free from the control of the control system of domination and control. Interesting how that eclipse coincides with the end of the Pluto Capricorn cycle around the same time period, which is supposed to signify the end of the destruction of everything that's not in humanity's best interest. And last time Pluto Capricorn happened, prior to now, was the American Revolution. So that's going to be worth talking about. But first, I want to ask you to first explain who you are for those that haven't heard about you, and then explain who Billy Meier is for those that haven't heard about him. You first, though. Glorify yourself by all means first. Who you are, what you experienced, and what causes you to do the stuff that you do to promote Billy Meier's work and anything else that's worth getting out. And then we'll go from there. I'll use your the blog page and the website that you've given me, theyfly.com. and the They Fly blog as a guide throughout the program. So you've got the floor, your life story. Go ahead.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, my background is a long story. Let's just say that I've done a lot of very creative work in my life pertaining to music, arts, inventions, and things like that. And while I had no actual practical training in anything other than painting, fine arts, and playing my guitar and writing songs, I managed somehow, after a bit of, transformational time, personal crises, whatever you want to call it, to recreate myself, start a new life. And that was somewhere right around the age of between 27 and 29. I think that's also referred to as a Saturn return in astrology, which is not one of my main studies at all, but I recall that. It was at that time that I embarked on learning new things, taking on the responsibility of raising a child by myself, lots of interesting things for somebody who had no skills, no life work experience to speak of, etc. So from that point on, I ventured forward. I created many things. I pioneered different things in different fields, including water purification and I was one of the first people to ever create literally ebooks online. That was an idea that while other people were thinking certainly about digital publishing in 1995, I woke up with the idea, met a guy in Malibu, California, who thought it was a great idea. He was going to do downloadable movies. We set up a company. It was called eBooks until he lost control of that name for reasons I don't recall. Anyway, I've done lots of interesting things, but in 1979, I walked into a bookstore in Los Angeles called the Bodhi Tree. I saw the first, what we call coffee table color photograph book of Billy Meier's fantastic, clear, primarily daytime UFO photos, which, by the way, are still irreproducible. And that just set me on this journey of study. I was reading whatever was in that one book over and over until in 1986, I met somebody in a little cafe in Sedona, Arizona, who lived in LA and told me if I came up there, he'd give me 1,800 pages of the 3 years worth of conversations, transcripts of them in English, translated from the German. When I returned to LA, I did that. I received these fantastic conversations and studied them for months. It was 2 years after that I opened a newspaper in LA, and there was a so-called new discovery from Lawrence Livermore Laboratories about the connection between A-bomb testing and the ozone damage. And when I saw that, as I started to read it with the percentages, et cetera, I wondered to myself why I already knew the info. I reached under my bed, pulled out the first 100 pages of this, what was called mimeographed printing technique they used before Xerox. And there in the 1975 transcript was the first of the mention that I would see of this same information, which was now coming forward as new discoveries 13 years later. I would subsequently learn that Billy Meier actually spoke about this whole situation with the ozone and atomic energy and all in 1951. But the point of it was this was the turning point where I knew that this case was about something far more than great UFO photos. And I also recalled that I'd been reading fascinating information in these transcripts, and now I returned to them. And my point and my purpose was to look for more of the scientific information, which I would find and which would be brought to my attention, which other people would find too, so that today we have about, maybe 250 plus specific examples of Billy Meier's impeccably prophetically accurate scientific information that he verifiably published anywhere from a few months to 60 years or more before official discovery. That is when I decided this is the higher standard of proof. This is what I'm going to, keep my eyes out for. And indeed, it establishes the authenticity of the Meier case without a shadow of a doubt, as has been confirmed by other people who have been researching as well. So in the year 2000, I went to Switzerland for the first time. I had joined as what's called a passive member, somebody who doesn't live in Switzerland, who's interested and wants to participate at a more active level. It was the first of my 20 trips there. I have produced or co-produced 20 documentaries on Meier, and I met him for the first time. It'd be 4 years later, actually technically 5 in 2004, that I would ask him if I could officially represent him and his work, as I had already since 1987 been giving presentations on this material. We came to an agreement that we finalized in a contract which provided for non-payment to either him or me so that we could keep it very clean, and I would not be obligated in a financial contractual way to say that everything was this or that. It's simply that I could present the information as they provided it, and I could maintain my own opinion, including disagreeing or not knowing if that's the case. So it brings us up in effect to today. I can only also say that since 2001, I had myself become proactive in taking on any and all professional skeptics who would engage at all. Most of them had been lambasting the Meier case as a hoax for a long time. I feel content that we've sufficiently defeated them, though they're quite cowardly. They won't even engage anymore. My friend Andrea recently engaged in a conversation online with a skeptic named Michael Shermer, who's been deriding and ridiculing the contacts and the evidence for a long time. She basically gave him enough rope to just self-dismantle and self-destruct. He couldn't answer any of the questions. He'd never actually analyzed the photos that he was judging, and the disparaging remarks that he's made towards Meier certainly he couldn't substantiate either. So it's been a rough haul, because there still are lots of people that spew nonsense online, either pretending to be contactees of so-called Pleiadians who don't exist, or being skeptics and attacking the evidence, etc. Nonetheless, I relish all of it because I have enough experience. I had my own sighting within 20 feet of a small monitoring craft when I lived in the mountains of Brazil. There's 130 other eyewitnesses, 5 other photographers. It goes on and on. But most people that get into the UFO topic and become at all familiar with the so-called Pleiadians, as they say, a non-existent race, they either don't know anything about Meier, or they've had a lot of disinformation from the quacks and charlatans in ufology to a person know absolutely nothing and have no evidence to support their, crazy claims of channeling and all, which is basically schizophrenia. Now, I've shotgunned at you a lot of response quickly so that we can, move on to anything that you want to ask about or you think that your audience is interested in. I took a breath.
Sorry, I had a problem with my mute button there. Okay. Yes. Well, for those that are familiar with Billy Meier, I guess, not that you're talking about him behind his back if I ask you to do this, but by all means, explain who he is and what he
Sure.
has, what happened to him specifically that causes him to do the stuff that he does. So
Sure.
let's get into that too, please.
You betcha. So Billy Meier is a now 83-year-old man living in Switzerland who claims that since he was a 5-year-old boy, pardon me, it's really dry up where I live. Since he was a 5-year-old boy, he's been having voluntary, wide awake, face-to-face, on board and on Earth and other places, conversations and meetings with people of 2 races, really, maybe 3, but primarily from people who are actually known as the Plejaren, Plejaren, for those who want to look into it. And these people, as I said, his first teacher started to tutor him when he was 5 years of age, and he was taught and mentored by this man Svath for 11 years. Subsequent to that, by a woman named Esket, who doesn't actually come from a race in this universe, though it's a race related to the Plejaren. And then that was for 11 years. And then in 1975, he began what are known as the official contacts. They began on January 28th, 1975, with a woman named Semyaze. Now, at this time, he was instructed to use the term Pleiadians, which he immediately questioned, because he said, well, why would I refer to you by this name, since there are no Pleiadians, there's no life on the Pleiades, and you and your people are known as Plejaren. And they said, well, it's very simple. Once you, Billy Meier, start publishing and disseminating your photographs of our craft, your films, your transcripts, your conversations, your prophecies and predictions, you're going to find that all sorts of people will pop up and appear, and they will claim to be contacting Pleiadians and channeling Pleiadians and meeting and having babies with Pleiadians, and you will right away know not to bother, because they will self-identify as liars, which of course has been true in great volume since 1975. Now, his contacts did not end with these people. There were hiatuses for periods of time due to certain things, but they continue to this day. And the people who would say otherwise, of course, are trying to profit from spreading disinformation and entrancing gullible people who haven't yet learned to think. Nonetheless, there's always time for that, hopefully, because time is running out for many things. You mentioned the civil wars that are coming. Yes. In 1981 and 87, when Billy Meier published versions or the first publication of what are known as the Hanok prophecies. In those prophecies, it foretells specifically that the United States of America will have two coming civil wars, two terrible civil wars, one following upon the other, and it can't be helped, but that the country will break up into 5 or so separate territories with sectarian dictatorial rule playing a significant role. Now, I think as you were speaking about it in your introduction, Andrew, it's pretty clear that we are in the early stages of great breakdown in the country, anarchy, conflict, racial war, civil war, whatever you want to call it, all of the above. And there's a lot that can be said about it if needs be, but these prophecies, the Hanok prophecies, are not something that were written in 1981. By the prophet Hanok or Enoch about 10,000 years ago.
Hang on, I lost connection with you for about 5 seconds there.
Sure.
Could you please, hopefully you didn't lose your train of thought, but flash back 15
Sure.
seconds and then repeat what you just said.
Sure, I'm going to rewind.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Sorry about that.
What I was saying is these prophecies that include, among many other things, the breakup of the U.S. pending civil wars and what have you, they were not authored by Meier, and they did not get authored in 1981 or 87 if we take the Meier information at face value. And nobody has to believe it, of course. They were originally authored by the prophet Enoch, known as Hanok in German, and that is over 10,000 years ago. He was one of the contact people. There were 6 others, and the other 6 include Billy Meier, but Hanok or Enoch was the first one in this particular mission that began long ago. And these prophecies have been in the keeping of the Pleiaren, as have the predictions of Jeremiah and other information that is very pertinent to us at this time, since it also contains much information about the rampantly spreading diseases, and that's a term that they've used for millennia to describe the epidemics and pandemics that would really devastate, earthly people. And we are experiencing one of those now, of course, and there's unfortunately more to come.
Thank you. So I'd like to get this out of the way right now, so it's not an issue later on. Gosha, I did listen to her talk that she gave. It was quite an interesting coincidence or synchronicity, whatever you want to call it, that right after I contacted you and asked you to come on my show, and I got the confirmation yes from you. I saw on my subscription page that Gosha, who runs the Cosmic Agency YouTube channel and channels this, said to communicate with this entity named Svaru from the Tegeta star system, said that she was talked a little about Billy Meier. She praised him for his work, but she also made the allegation that he was making a few things up later in his years when he stopped communicating with the ETs. Do you think that she doesn't know what she's talking about? Or would you say, okay, maybe Billy Meier, he may have stretched the truth on a couple of things for the sake of giving him something to talk about with the people that were his fans, or what do you have to say about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll say unequivocally that the person, Gosia, whatever her name is, or whatever she calls herself, is a shameless liar and profiteer. She has, as far as I know, never presented one piece of verifiable evidence to support her claims. And people, when they claim that they're channeling, which happens to be impossible, basically, there's very few people that can bring forward any significant information from any other non-corporeal form. She's not one of them. She's incorrect. We've already charted over 250 specific examples of Meier's prophetically accurate scientific, environmental, geopolitical, and economic information. Meier, in 1989 and again in 95, first predicted that there would be epidemics coming out of China from laboratories there, and they'd be lung diseases. I mean, this was the first SARS. And then, of course, we received information on February 23rd. I published on February 25th with impeccably accurate information about this pandemic, this disease. We were the first on record to publish this is a pandemic. I even today put up a simple new 20-plus question self-test on the COVID-19 information. Anybody can take it and determine for themselves that the Meier material has been not only accurate, but it's the important information is always published by Meier and subsequently by us before any official discovery. So you have in the person of Gosia, who's decided to put herself out to the world as something that she isn't, a phony. You have somebody who's a quack. I would tell it to her face. She cannot substantiate anything because she's unknowledgeable. She hasn't even studied the Meier material well enough to convincingly make up her own crap about it. There are no life forms on Taygeta that have nothing better to do than to channel or talk through the head of a dumb woman whose main goal is to create some sort of a celebrity and profit for herself on whatever levels that she's interested in that. And the same holds true for every other one of the so-called channels and contactees, not a one of whom can offer a single piece of evidence, not a one of whom has suffered anything nearly as difficult and tragic as the events in Meier's life, which include 23 documented assassination attempts. These are people who sit at their little computers with their empty heads that are channeling nothing, making up garbage. And unfortunately, the people that listen to this who have no knowledge, who have done no research, who haven't unfortunately learned to think their way through information and evidence, who've never had to make a case in front of a judge, as I have, who've never made their case in front of really professional investigators and the toughest skeptical challenges. These are people who are just wannabes, kind of mainly millennial, mush-minded cornflakes between the ears wannabes, and it's a disservice to people during these times of such dangerous diseases, of such upheavals socially, of such critical challenges to people's lives that these quacks get online. I posted a long comment today on her video, probably the one you saw. It was taken down within a matter of minutes, as other people told me who've gone there to repost it or to challenge her. This is somebody who simply wants to bilk people one way or the other to get followers, to mislead people for her own ego needs. And this is the case with every one of the quacks in ufology. And last year, I was at an event called Contact in the Desert, and I deliberately called out by name all of these UFO people who are utter quacks, as many as I illustrated them, showed them in PowerPoint, and some of them were attending the conference. They could have come up to me and challenged me, but they didn't. So until people start to prioritize what's important in life, which is finding the truth, not belief in fantasies and lies and charlatans, then they will be misled. They will miss the opportunity, quite possibly, to get valid, important information, absolutely free, that can help them in their lives, quite possibly removing some of the risks that they may otherwise find in their lives if they know how to apply the information. So I hope I'm not ambiguous in the way I feel about that quack.
Well, I have listened to her work, and she does not, from a standpoint of body language or demeanor, come across as someone who is trying to be a fraud. And I say that because I've even seen a few people, at least one person, try to validate the Billy Meier by looking at his demeanor and body language and tone, and they were not able to find anything that would suggest that he's making it up. In fact, they pointed a few things out about the way he blinks his eyes and The way his shoulders move suggests that he's believes what he's saying and is very knowledgeable about what he's saying. And I can't help but wonder if you were to do the same thing with Gosha and many of the other contactees, you would be able to find that they're not trying to be a fraud. And
Well,
it's actually easy to see body language is not that hard to deduce. There's a documentary I once saw called Secrets of Body Language, and I don't mean to give
yeah,
myself a lot of credit here, but I did take notes while watching that. And then just for the fun of it, I decided to analyze using my notes from that documentary George W. Bush's 9/11 interview from way back in the day that he gave on camera. And using just my notes from that documentary, it actually wasn't that hard to analyze Bush and discover that he was chock full of deceitful body language and such to suggest, yeah, he knows 9/11 was an inside job and he was definitely in on it. You're not going to find the same thing, I'm sure, with these people. And also Sherry Edwards, bioacoustic voice analyst, another person that I'm sure has channeled these people that claim to be contactees, and she would assert that they're not trying to be
well,
frauds. So do you have
let
anything
me
to say
let
about
me
that?
let me respond to that. First of all, I have a little background in NLP myself. I did some studying with Tony Robbins, as a matter of fact, and I'm not unfamiliar with reading body language. However, people who are psychopathic or sociopathic, it's not necessarily you use the word a couple times, trying to be a fraud. They get into a frame of mind where they justify to themselves and have a full belief in themselves, where they're not in conflict, where you're not going to read necessarily tells or that, well, they're trying to, quote unquote, they're being deceptive. You have to be really much more, let's say, schooled in such things. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. So, and when we say contactees, we should use the word alleged. Until one of these charlatans can produce evidence, they are at best alleged. Now, go into a little more about body language and how you determine the truth on something and all from an interesting situation. 3 years ago, on a January morning at 8:30, I was contacted by phone by a gruff-sounding older guy I didn't know. He said his name was Joe. He only said he's an investigator, and would I be willing to speak about the Billy Meier case? I said yes. He said, are you sure? Because I think it's a fraud, a hoax. I said, sure, let's talk. We spoke for 3 months, Andrew, and we went back and forth. Every Saturday morning at 8:30, I would get a call from Joe, and I knew nothing more about him. He disappears in March, comes back in August, and he says, I'm going to tell you who I am if you'll still talk to me. Yeah, I'll talk to you. And then I'll tell you about your Billy Meier case. Check your email. So I checked my email, and he says, do you see what's there? And I said, yeah, these are all citations and things from the government, from the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation, blah, blah. He says, yes. I was a top investigator and supervisor for the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation and the Department of State. We did not, let's say, spend time on UFO cases because our task is to protect the security of the United States of America. And in service of that purpose, I personally investigated, vetted, and supervised the investigation of hundreds of people, meaning military and political people, people in government, people who had or would have their finger on the nuclear trigger. We ferreted out spies and moles. He says, I'm very familiar with reading body language and knowing when people are truthful. And he said, I'll get to that in a second. However, he said, I went back and I checked your earliest evidence from 1964 that you had online in India when young Billy, actually known then as Edward Albert Meier, is 27 years of age. He's wandering around India as a vagabond. He has a primitive Kodak camera, an old camera, a knapsack, not much money, but he's got an album with 80 UFO photos that he shows to a highly credible reporter at a prestigious newspaper in India, which happens to still be there. And you have still, meaning in the Meier context, you have a dozen of these photos still, including this one with a cross in the sky and all of this. And he said, I've looked at all the skeptical arguments and all this, and my question for the skeptics is, unless you can show me how and where this man obtains 80 UFO photos in 1964, you have no argument, and you better accept that this is real. He said, furthermore, I'll tell you right now, this case is 100% real. I will take on any skeptics on your behalf. He did, demolished both of them. And he said, furthermore, after I did all my study, I went online and I looked at all the videos I could find of Billy Meier. He says, I know what I'm looking at when I see a person, and that's about the most honest man I've ever seen. Now, you're not going to get that kind of an evaluation if you take somebody like Gosia, and if I, let's say, drilled her, questioned her for 5 minutes or less, she'd fall apart on it, but she'd be making up stuff right and left because it's all fluffy nonsense. I don't know why people want to believe people who have nothing to substantiate their claims, nothing, no backgrounds in investigation, nothing. But they weave these stories and they sound terrific and they're very charming and engaging, as a lot of psychopaths are. So you get psychopaths who tell people stories. This is very typical in all sorts of fields in life. These are your salesmen too. And people fall for it. They have no discernment. They will not say, well, wait a minute, Gosia, where's your evidence that you're channeling somebody from another world? Let me ask you this question. And then you start asking questions such as Billy Meier asked of the player, and this poor woman is going to suddenly have I'm sorry, we have static on the line, I can't hear you, and she'll disappear. So this is not a time in which, I should actually preface this a little bit. In 1986 and 7, I began going to channeled events in Los Angeles, California. And I saw a lot of the so-called top channels. Bashar, channeled by Daryl Anka, and Sean Randall is channeling, I forget what the heck she called her thing, and all these people, and you've got all these people channeling, and I came away with enough significant, uniquely important information that I could fill a teacup with room left over for an Olympic-sized swimming pool. In other words, nothing. They never got anything right unless they were scuffling through Billy's material and plucking stuff out to then regurgitate as their own. I knew Lisa Royale and others, all these people. Not a one, nothing, not a piece of evidence, never. So I don't know why, in the face of the most significant development in all of human history, and that means confirmed existence of an extraterrestrial race, confirmed contact with that race for 78 years, we would let a wannabe like this and the others that are out there blabbing away take 1 minute of our precious time. They repeat the stories. Oh, Billy Meier, yeah, his contacts were real in the beginning, but then they stopped. I'm the one who's getting contact. And they make up these goofy names for the people that they're supposedly channeling, as if advanced beings in another world have nothing better to do than sit around until they get a call from Gosia to take over her mind, such as it may be, and that's not saying very much, and start babbling through her. Really? These people have nothing else to do? If they, I mean, come on. So when you start looking for evidence, you find none, nothing, zip and zero. I just don't, I don't know. If people really want that kind of thing, they're wasting their time, they're wasting their lives, and I'll take on any challenge from any of them, including the listeners who have questions. I don't mind being challenged. I don't mind being questioned. I guarantee you Gosia doesn't want to talk to me.
Well, there's some controversy that was stirred up with her, especially when Tolek, the Andromeda Council contactee, who, among other of his sources, is a higher level entity on the council that says to come from Tegeta, and Tolek made it clear that there is no way that my Andromeda Council contacts would not be aware, given the state of consciousness that they exist in, of the existence of the entity that Gosia claims to be communicating with, that comes from Tegeta. And Tolek was very assertive that Gosia is talking with some artificial intelligence entity masquerading as a benevolent extraterrestrial. Gosia did put out a couple videos and all on YouTube to speak in her defense about the matter, give her some credit for being able to stand up for herself in that regard. But the very idea that some contactee can make the claim, I can assure you that this other contactee is either wrong, flat out wrong, trying to be wrong, or mistaken at the very best, because my contacts don't assert that they don't exist, and they would know that it existed if they didn't. When someone like you hears something like that, how do you look at the issue?
Sure. Well, it's very easy, but first let me say there is no Tolek or Toltec. I think I know the guy's a nice guy, but he's not channeling anybody from Andromeda. We cannot, none of us on Earth have the capacity to be able to receive information from beings that exist in Andromeda, let alone in the Pleiar system. We do not have the capacity, and we cannot demonstrate it. If you try and do a test on telepathy on this fellow, he's not going to be able to pass it. So people, this is a game that's being played in a closed circle of so-called UFO contacts and contactees. And it's not a matter, from my perspective, I don't mind if people challenge this, because we've documented this stuff so deeply. We have had more analyses done on Billy Meier's photos and films, metal samples, sound recordings. He just has so much evidence. Why would we even care about what a bunch of goofy, deluded people are babbling about with each other, claiming that they're getting information from the Andromeda Council? Really? How many of those people were forewarning about coronavirus? None of them. They didn't find that in the Meier material in time to claim that they were the ones to find it. So that's a silly time-wasting game. There's nothing to be gained there. Can you give me anything of significance? There isn't any there. I can rattle off one scientific thing after another that we've been able to show Meier published before official discovery. I personally went up a year ago to see a scientist who's working on this new Mars mission rover project, and I brought him several pages of Meier's information on Mars that he verifiably published 20 and 30 years before NASA discovered it. The guy couldn't, his jaw was hanging open. Could this man, he says to me, be a lucky guesser? I said, I don't think so, Ken. Here's 20, 30 different things. Mars, black holes, you name it. You're not going to get that from these terrible charlatans, these people that have nothing better in life to do than to try to profit and trade off of the hard work of a man who has endured attacks on his life, attacks on his family. He learned in advance his left arm would be ripped off his body. Do you think these people want to endure anything even remotely like that? No, they're not qualified. They had nothing better to do, and they're looking for an easy ride, somehow to get followers to buy whatever garbage they're selling or join whatever delusional group that they're promoting. Go ahead, tell Gosia that this is what's being said about her. People know she's a quack. I mean, we've got people who send me links to this stuff, and they're laughing at her. She's just such a shallow, transparent fraud, but people would only know that if they get a glimmer about what's real. Why would we believe people who cannot put one factual piece of evidence on the table? I mean, really, this is hard to fathom. I've been there 30 plus years ago, almost 40 years ago. I went through the whole route with the channels. It's entertainment at best, but it's a tragedy at worst that they are deflecting people from the truth, and they making claims that she knows anything. Billy Meier's contact stopped. Really, you idiot? What are you talking about? What do you know? Nothing. And it deserves the harshest criticism. I mean, really, would we take this kind of crap? If this was somebody who was giving medical advice, well, I got information from this entity that says what you should do is inject sodium bicarbonate in your vein. I mean, then a bunch of gullible people are going to go and do that? But we can poison our minds with the garbage that they spew out? Really, somebody give me something to show that this is anything but a very bad joke on gullible people. And if we can't face it, if we can't face the fact that we're being taken for a ride by a con artist, that's simply what she is, well, it explains why people get all wrapped up in politics, why they get all wrapped up in religions, because they want something and somebody outside of themselves to give them some magic answer, to deflect from the hard work of learning how to think themselves. This is our task in life, folks. 100% self-responsibility. Billy Meier doesn't get on a microphone and channel BS. He doesn't even bother doing interviews anymore. He put out the information, he publishes it, and it's up to people to discover what they think, what they can find. If they think it's valid, fine. If they don't, that's fine too. If you want to challenge it, go ahead, challenge anything in the Meier case that he's published. We have not found any inaccurate science. And in a few thousand pages of the English, there's 45,000 pages of German. What has this woman got except double talk? It's a form of silly hypnosis where people fall for somebody. Hi. You know, it used to make jokes. I did New Age comedy, by the way, for a dozen years, starting back in the 80s. And I used to do a bit because I'd been to all the channeling, and my bit was this. Hi, I'm dead, and I've got something really important to tell you. And then I would proceed to say, according to your auras, you who are masters of time on this plane of existence, who walk in the perfected light of beauty and love, you are dead. And I could do that crap. I have a friend who thinks he's channeling the Elohim, the so-called creator gods that didn't exist anyhow. These were human beings, but he thinks he's channeling the creator gods of the universe and all this stuff. So I channeled to him. He looked at me like, oh, how you doing that? I said, you're full of crap, you know. So we've got to not, oh man, I mean, I don't know if anybody really disagrees with this and they want to write, and that's fine. If they want to challenge, if they want to interview, if they want to have Gosia and I have a little discussion, oh, that'd be fine too. Because I don't pull punches on this. I respect Billy Meier too much to put up with BS from con artists. And I've gone up against all these skeptics myself. Can't get any of them now to even take it on because we've proved the case up and down. So what are they going to do? Skeptics are the same as the con artists, channelers. Nothing, just make believe. So I hope I'm not been ambiguous about how I feel about all that stuff.
I think that's the second time you've said that, oh, not being ambiguous. Well, I can't really blame you for not being able to keep your cool so well. The planet Mars just went retrograde, and an interesting thing about that is I've seen in the astrology reports, people may not be able to control their tempers as well with Mars going retrograde yesterday, and I myself seem to have succumbed to it as well. Patricia Corey, a contactee of Syrian extraterrestrials, caused a bit of a brouhaha when she asserted that Nikola Tesla, he may have been a good guy, but he actually had bad extraterrestrials working behind him who had intended to take advantage of his technology. And also I made it clear to Patricia, well, some people may not believe that the Anunnaki could really be around anymore because Mark Kimmel, another contact, he said that their planet self-destructed. Well, Patricia unfortunately took my whole thing out of context when I told her that, and I even told her, I haven't read your books, but they're not in the public libraries. Why don't you ask the librarians to see if maybe they could get your books in the libraries? She also took that out of context too, and she actually unfriended me on Facebook. I reached out to her and I told her, Patricia, you got this all wrong. You totally looked at this the wrong way. I don't know why you had to look at this as derogatory statements. I was only pointing this stuff out to help people try to get the truth out by pointing out that one person said A and another person said B, and both of them can't be right, and all that. You did not have to take this the wrong way. And Patricia did actually respond and said, okay, if you delete some of the comments that you put on social media saying that I unfriended you, which I did on her Project Camelot interview that she did with Carrie Cassidy yesterday. I said, Patricia unfriended me on Facebook because she took what I said out of context, and she said, if you delete that, I'll friend you again on Facebook. And she hasn't sent me the response yet to friend me, but apparently with Mars going retrograde, some people are going to get a little icky, and she did, and I did too, apparently not being able to say what I wanted to mean in a way that came across as trying to find truth. I may have come across the wrong way. So this stuff is going on, and people just need to be careful with Mars going retrograde for a couple months. I just want to point that out.
Sure, but you know what? I mean, while I just wanted to be emphatic about it, I have no trouble being that emphatic, even when Mars is direct and, you know, all the rest of it. The thing is this, that is a pool, a little pool in which I don't dabble actively because there's nothing of substance there. I prefer and I focus on spending my time working on and with the Meier material and doing research into the things that are appearing scientifically and seeing if indeed did Meier have anything to say about this before or not, and various things. The world of Carrie Cassidy, who's another quack. Look, I'm just telling you, this is my opinion. I've been researching for 42 years. These people have never come up into a level of credibility. They're not professional. They're not real researchers. They're not investigators. Carrie Cassidy years ago wanted to interview Billy Meier, and Billy said, talk to my representative, Michael Horn. She wouldn't, because she wanted to have some, well, I'm going to only interview Billy. He doesn't want to bother with these people himself. His English is not such that he can express everything as clearly as he'd like. And I'm authorized to do it for him, and I have no problem with it. This is like, it's just amateur night. These people with their little silly paranormal UFO games are it's old hat stuff. It doesn't have any relevance now. None. There's nothing there. What can we get? We can talk about all these people claiming to be contactees of this or that. It's nonsense. I remember asking, I wrote an article and I said, next time somebody pops up and tells you they're a contactee of some other worldly being and all this, ask them, when was the last time the president of the United States, the vice president, anybody in the Congress, the Senate, the Supreme Court, the governor of their state, the mayor of their town, any of these people ever contacted them to ask them anything or to give them important information? But yet they somehow are important enough to be getting messages from other worlds, and the messages never have anything of provability, high significance. It's just gobbledygook. Anybody can do it. If you get in a goofy enough state of mind, you can start pretending you're channeling whatever you decide you're channeling. But why? I have to ask it now. Why? After all these decades now of this nonsense, why go there? It has no value in our real lives. It's merely escapist entertainment at best and delusional disinformation at worst. Do we want to sit down? If we go into a university, I lecture in universities, you think I would get up and say, well, according to Gosia, who's channeling non-existent Pleiadians, I wouldn't have a gig there. What kind of, what photos am I going to show? I can show Meier's photos. I've got 617 of them in the photo book. I can be showing his evidence for hours. And Gosia, what? She's going to grin at the camera and babble and double talk people? So where is our discernment? There's no tolerance for this in my life. I've been there. I've gone through it. I was patient with people. I asked for evidence over and over. They have none. They're con artists. Con artists. I'm not losing my cool at all here. It's simply the fact. That's it. Now, if you have any other things about that are important to you, that's fine. But if you have things that you want to discuss about the Meier case, it might be, more productive for us to get into that and any questions you think.
I do. But one more thing I want to address, not so much a contactee, but accessing what is available to us by utilizing our infinite consciousness potential. I have made it clear on my show without question, and I've shown this too, that my number one source of info is Andrew Bartzis, the Akashic Records reader, and I have justified my claim on that, making this argument: if the Akashic Records say then it must be accessible in the Akashic Records, and if the Akashic Records say it, then it must be true. So if Andrew Bartzis says it, presuming that he's correctly accessing the Akashic Records and he's able to look there and not being tampered with by any entity, then what he's saying must be true. Therefore, I see his Akashic Records reading skills as the best way to get a definitive answer to a question. And one who's very close-minded would say, oh my God, you actually believe someone who claims to be looking into the Akashic records, how can you believe that that's for real? Well, if you know that we're all infinite consciousness, you know that all the information in the universe is actually stored within us, because every small part of the hologram is just a smaller representation of the whole hologram. All the representation of the hologram, the information is there. So that's how remote viewing works. That's how you can, but Akashic Records reading, that's even deeper than remote viewing, because it could go to whole new levels. So to say that we don't have the capability to do this, well, bullcrap. I've just explained how we do have the capability to do it, because we're infinite consciousness, and the implications behind the smaller being a representation of the whole shows how it can, in theory, be accessed. It's all a matter of faith to believe whether or not he can be believed. But I have not seen anything, like I said, from a body language or tone of demeanor standpoint, from Andrew Bartzis, that would suggest that he's faking or wrong when he says what he says. That's backed up by his Akashic Records reading abilities and the claims he makes through them. It's not verifiable, but I don't think he's a fraud. So do you think I'm taking it a little too far using him as a source? Or do
Well,
you think maybe I'm onto something here?
first of all, and this is where I like to say, according to the information in the case, there are certain things that I cannot prove, nor can I disprove them, because they pertain to either the long distant past or to the as yet unarrived future. Now, coming from Meier, what he said is, Akashic Records is a term that was created by, I believe, right around by Rudolf Steiner, and it's not exactly accurate. There is something called the universal storage banks, which are a bit different, but close enough probably that Steiner might, we might say, okay, he meant that. But here's the point about it. Unless you can validate information that people claim, it doesn't matter where they claim they're getting it. For instance, if the information from this man is about all sorts of fancy ET stuff and this and that, all the rest, nobody can prove or disprove that. However, if he was presented with very specific questions, such as have been presented to Meier, and Meier has presented as well to the Plejaren with specific answers pertaining to things that are highly scientific and not yet known to us, then we could determine how well he's really able to enter these banks. Now, while you've said that we potentially carry all the knowledge of the universe within us, it doesn't mean we have access to it, or we'd be far more evolved than we are. There's lots of things which we can conceive of, if you will, saying, reincarnation, telepathy, all sorts of things. We might say, well, that's true. We believe it's true, or we say we believe it isn't. We can't necessarily prove it. We can state, here's the evidence, or the best evidence we have for something. People who claim to read the Akashic Records, but yet you can't verify it with any really hardcore, let's say, scientific information, which would be up there in the storage banks, then it's useless. And why do people want to make those claims? Usually because they want to give readings, or they want to be important, or they sell something in the process. There are, according to the information from Meier, a bare handful of people present on Earth who have the ability, other than Meier, to go into the storage banks and to access information. It's not an easy process, and one has to really have a very high developed, trained consciousness to do this. None of the people you ever hear of are even remotely that intelligent, disciplined, or have that type of background. And as Meier has said, the people that can do this don't come forward. They don't want to be known. They are, few and far between, and that's another whole other level of things. And if anybody reads into the hundreds and hundreds of contacts, the thousands of pages of information where Meier is interacting with the Plejaren and asking very specific questions, and then you find out 20, 30 years more later, oh my gosh, we just discovered that, and that's how I realized the case was true. I was reading supposed new scientific discoveries, one after another, and I had them in my hands from years prior to that. Why would we even bother with this blathering nonsense? What do we want to know anyhow? We have to seek answers from within ourselves, but we also can learn from people who are more advanced and knowledgeable. And both Meier and the Plejaren have said on any number of occasions, We don't know that. There are things, they're not perfect. There's none of this Space Brothers perfect being stuff is true. These are human beings, longer lived, more advanced, but they're not supermen. They don't have the answer to everything. Can they travel in space and probably in time based on the evidence? Yes. But they have their own limitations, and they don't need us to believe in them. And they certainly don't need to start talking through anybody's head. Meier had to be trained for years, trained from childhood to be able to be able to do the things he could do today, and that he could do even as a teenager. Even at the age of 7, he already had the thinking capacity of a 35-year-old man because of the tutoring he had on an ongoing basis from his first extraterrestrial mentor. None of these people even know what I'm talking about. They just, they're winging it. They're trying to get followers and make themselves important. It's pretty pathetic.
Yes, and I'm sure that Billy Meier is definitely genuine. Well, all the more reason I believe that. I mean, the guy's got one arm, for crying out loud, and he's written thick books and constructs UFO models with that one arm. Do you think he'd be going through all that trouble to do those things? And if it wasn't for real, no, he would not. So I'm saying that now to make it clear to the doubters, you're making a big mistake doubting him. Although there are some things he said, though, that fly in the face of what some other people have said, and being the kind of guy that I am, that would notice that, right? Like an alarm bell goes off in my head when I notice that, where one person says A, another person says B, and I realize they can't be right, so I have to raise awareness about it. I might as well bring that up. And
get into those specifics if you want to, and we can discuss them at least. And nobody should believe Billy either. You have to think your way through it, or you're just, or it's a religious frame of mind. We're not here for believers. It's better to be a doubter, because then at least you can start to think your way through it. But go ahead, please, and let's see what we can do.
Okay, I do remember Billy Meier in a YouTube video I saw back in the day, Apollo 11. He said something to the effect of, the Apollo 11 moon landing was a fraud from A to Z. The people at Houston, they received video footage or audio footage of something from a remote source that was not the astronauts. And I believe he also said that Aldrin, Armstrong, and Collins, the astronauts who were allegedly on Apollo 11, they were hypnotized in some way to believe that they went to the moon, when in fact they didn't. And he also pointed out something about Apollo 13, about how that was faked, that there never actually was a disaster. We were led to believe there was, and while we were all being suckered into believing there was a disaster, there was actually a mission being sent to the moon to collect some sort of a relic. So do you have anything to say about that regarding Apollo 11 and Apollo 13?
Yeah, sure. Well, here's an interesting thing. Apollo 11, what was the date of that again? 1969, I think?
July 1969, yes.
Right. So in 1958, 11 years before Apollo 11, 11 years before the first alleged moon landing, Meier describes a whole bunch of stuff about the coming attempts, hard landings on the moon, etc., and speaks about them, and also says there will be one, supposedly the first on August 20th, which will simply be a worldwide staged deceit as a result of. Now, wait, that's 11 years before we even did that. So how would he know that? How would he know all the other things, of course, also in this 1958 letter, such as the fact that there would be 2 U.S.-Iraq Gulf Wars. The second one would be led by a president who'd be the son of a former president, and it would lead to a disaster and terrorism. How would he know that in 1958? And everything else in here, that there would be computers which would be interconnected electronically around the world. That, I mean, this is an amazing document freely available on my website, 1958 letter. How would he know that? And then when all the details, as you mentioned, we have the contact information. It's on my blog. If people search moon landing at theyflyblog.com, they'll find the whole explanation, including what the Apollo 13 mission was about, which was to put these artifacts on the moon that never got there, so that when later, when countries were looking through telescopes or getting them, oh, there, yeah, that's Apollo 11. They never went there. They never went there. Yes, Meier's information tells you these people, the first 3 astronauts were manipulated through drugs and hypnosis, as were other people involved. There were, I think, a total of 37 people, they said, were overall involved in this. A lot of them no longer living. So is that true? What Billy said? You have to make up your own mind, but you have to ask yourself, wait a minute. In 1958, how did he foretell that? How did he foretell these other manned moon landings that did take place? Accurate, he says these subsequent ones took place, but that one didn't. Wouldn't is really what we're talking about, because he's talking about the future. They talk about so many things. He talks about so many things in this document that happened since it was published. It will just astound people. So when they can have something like this, where you can know, well, Billy Meier predicted all this, the fall of the Berlin Wall, all this stuff, and Gosia babbles about imaginary Pleiadians, and people want to believe that? I mean, this is why, if I go over the top, I go, oh my God, we have so much of this. His letter from 1951, he's the first person to warn specifically about unnatural, man-made climate change, global warming, damage to the ozone, the coming increase in frequencies of earthquakes and volcanic activity. I mean, it's astounding. And yet there are people that are just quacks getting other people's attention, and they'll never know about this.
Okay, hold on. I hate to interrupt you, but there's something you said there. Talking about global warming. Now, I've been hearing from all the conspiracy theorists that the idea of man-made global warming is a hoax. That's just something that the powers that be have suckered us into believing is real in order to brainwash us into thinking we need to give up our rights to save the Earth. Any global warming or global cooling that happens is a result of the sun and other rays from space and Mother Earth going through its natural cycles. And want to point that out. But another thing I do want to point out that Billy Meier said that I flat out cannot for the life of me make sense of is his claim that the Earth is going through overpopulation, because it's been said that the entire population of the Earth can fit easily, comfortably in the state of Texas with room to spare. So the idea that it's overcrowded is crazy. And even though the population of the Earth has spiked in recent times, ever since the discovery of oil, as people like Michael Ruppert have pointed out, that does not change the fact that, okay, even though it's rising at a great rate because of oil and may continue to rise, it's just a drop in the bucket. You take off all the people on the Earth, and the Earth would weigh the same, for crying out loud. It would be so little on the scale that it would be insignificant. So where are you making the assertion that it's overpopulated?
Sure, I'll take overpopulation first. We have now actually over 9 billion people on the planet. Okay, well, as you say, well, they could all fit in the state of Texas. You're not taking into account how much actual arable land exists on the planet, how much the planet needs to produce in terms of food, how much clean water and clean air needs to be present for nourishing all the life forms, including all animals, and how the planet needs to dispose of all waste. Now, it's a very simple thing to demonstrate. What a person can do is to take either an aquarium, or you can take a terrarium, a closed with a hole at the top. It's a round glass sphere. Get a big one, fill it up with earth and things, and put little insects and plants and flowers. And all you have to do in either of these things, because they are a microcosm, they are a finite space. The earth is a finite space. So just keep putting new life forms into it. Don't stop. Keep putting fish into your aquarium. Keep even trying to feed them. Sooner or later, things get polluted and life forms start to first they become aggressive with each other hugely, they kill each other off, and then they die of various kinds of poisonings. The Meier material isn't based on speculative and stupid conspiracy theories in either direction proposed by people who really have a very shallow knowledge. It's actually based on a huge amount of information published by Meier, given to him by the Pleiaren, detailing how much actual arable land, how much space and food growing land is necessary per person, how many people per given space can comfortably exist without overriding and imbalancing the natural order of things. Now, when you introduce automobiles, which were introduced, of course, almost 150 years, whatever it is, ago, into the scheme of things, and all other forms of combustion engines, let alone the use of atomic energy, which is so deadly and polluting that it will affect and damage us for centuries. Now you have the various damaging effects of not only the greenhouse gases, but all forms of polluting gases and byproducts of production. Every single thing that is produced utilizes energy and discharges waste. Even so-called green technologies are a joke in many cases because they are also contributing to the entire cycle of production, waste, overload, and pollution. The Pleiaren have given Meier from years ago accurate figures on the poisons that are contaminating the waters, the seas, human beings, the plastics that are in all of us, all of this stuff. And even all the time, there are so-called new discoveries confirming this by people who are scientists who don't have an agenda one way or the other. And Meier's material from 51 speaks about it. Early on, he's talking about because of overpopulation, it will become monstrous in terms of the contribution to the unnatural climate change and unnatural global warming, because, as you correctly said, global warming, climate changes are part of the natural cycle, but we have imbalanced it so it is now 75% unnatural, man-made. And look, I got into water filtration, 30, almost 40 years ago, because I recognized even then how bad water pollution was. I was into air pollution as far back as the 1960s. I even wrote with a couple friends of mine an animated cartoon episode we tried to get produced, but couldn't. We were too far ahead of the time. Wrote it in 1968 on air pollution. Air pollution, 1968, because I could see it, I could smell it, I identified it as a teenager. People who think, oh, it's all just a bunch of, you have to understand something here. Anything and everything is a double-edged sword. People who are let's say, Democrats, anti-environmentalists, they're going to attack Al Gore. He's just trying to profit on this. I'm not political. I don't care. I think in some ways he's a jerk. Some things he's right about. That's because when you're not political, you can see truth more easily and you don't have an axe to grind. You want to find out what you do about certain things in terms of the truth. So here's the problem here. The environmental damage is real. I've personally been aware of it for almost 50 years. I mean, what else do I need to know here? And Meier has a 60-page tract where he details every contribution you can think of. And the dopey people like Greta Thunberg who go half-cocked because she wants to scold everybody while she's flying around the world in her jets. All these people who don't even know the magnitude, the real magnitude of the environmental destruction. You have to understand, according to this Meier material too, and don't believe it, nothing to believe, just keep your eye on the ball. What they've also said is because of this overpopulation, the overbuilding of cities, the buildings of huge dams because of the way we've imbalanced everything to get water and trying to feed water to places on the earth where we shouldn't even try to grow stuff, this is going to produce even more earthquakes, more volcanic eruptions, and we've even had specific dates and locations for these things, and people are just too stupid to pay attention. They don't care. They're going to just keep on doing because they think they're entitled to. And Billy Meier can't be right. And this is all just a bad hoax by in this case, it's the Democrats or the left. I have no love for either. But they can be right. just like people on the right could be right, or the people with no political affiliation can be right, and we can all be wrong. We've got to get out of this thing of, well, it's just the corporations are going to, yes, they're going to take advantage of this. It doesn't mean there isn't a problem. It means they can't solve it, but they're going to try and tax us to get more money to enrich themselves. Now, how do you look at that paradigm where, yes, these corporations are all absolutely going to capitalize, they can't solve the problem, and the problem is real? Oh, gosh, that's different. That's not left. It's not right. It's not conspiracy by Al Gore or anything. It's simply the way things are. People are stupid, and they're going to allow this world to be destroyed to a large degree, a very large degree, if we follow these prophecies and predictions going back thousands of years as to what's coming. Billy Meier is the first person to talk about, gosh, clones, genetic engineering and manipulation, AI, laser weapons, going back to the 80s and earlier. I mean, and we want to listen to channels who don't know their ass from their elbow? Good God, our lives can depend on finding the truth. This is where the wake-up call for those who are ready to shake off the misinformation, the disinformation, the cheap charlatans and phonies who have misdirected everything. We don't have the luxury of lolling around and make-believe. There's enough of that goes on online and virtual reality and fake videos and all this stuff. If you can't get into reality, folks, you're going to be abused one way or the other. Billy Meier, 1958. The EU, which didn't fully exist then, and the US will attempt to biochip every man, woman, and child on the planet. That's going on now. Forget nonsense channeling. Look out. They're going to try to stick this in you and control your life. And who warned about it first? Billy Meier.
All right, ignoring the channels for a moment, there's another group of people that I want to ask about to see what you have to say about it. And my assertion that infinite consciousness and the fact that there is afterlife asserts that these people, I'm sure they're not faking it. One of my strongest supporters, Sean Margaret Cohen, the first person I ever interviewed on the show, and she even predicted of sorts 6 months before I'd be doing a radio show. I did a radio show, started doing it, that big things will be coming from me, and she was right. I did the show then. She's allegedly communicated with two of my grandparents that are now on the other side, as well as a girl I know that died of heroin overdose. And there was nothing in the session where she was speaking with the entities that I could see, that I saw on video during the time, that would suggest that she was faking it. And if you understand that there's an afterlife, you have to think that these entities, once you die and your soul spirit enters the afterlife, if it wanted to, it could, because it's of higher consciousness, temporarily come down here in some form that's fitting. And a fitting form would be through the someone who has the ability, because they have the DNA that allows them to do it, among other things, to be a psychic medium or channel. So Sean Margaret Cohen, I'm sure, is going to listen to this. She's going to have a field day if you assert that she was faking it. And I'm sure she would also. What do you have to say about it?
Sure. I'll tell you, according to this information, there is no afterlife as we know it, or as is claimed by various channels, spiritualists, etc. Well, what does that mean? How could there not be? Well, according to this information, and overall, the fact that you're interested in the truth, the greater spiritual truth, is really a saving grace for you or anybody else who wants to find the truth, because that is the direction one should go in. However, you're not going to get it from people who do this other kind of thing. And here's why. What they can't tell you, because they don't know it, is this. When we die, there's two critical aspects of the human being, among others, but these are the two critical aspects we would be talking about. The term soul is inaccurate. There is no such thing. There is the psyche. And this psyche, which is related to the material consciousness and has interplay between the unconscious and the material consciousness, is generally overall mainly located around the solar plexus. Hence, this term soul was adapted a long time ago. Then there is something called the human spirit. That is that hologram of the creation, this universe, this consciousness within which we live and which lives within us and which has created and sustains everything in this creation. This immortal, immutable human spirit is the eternal part of us. When we die, this thing erroneously called the soul, the psyche, which contains all the information about our life as well, our personality, our emotions, the things, our positives and negatives, if you will. This is all absorbed not only by the spirit and processed for the positive qualities, but it's absorbed into the consciousness block, the overall consciousness block for each spirit form, from which new personalities also derive information. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, and I don't want to represent that I am being absolutely perfectly accurate in everything here. This is going to be general because there are people that are even more knowledgeable about this, and Meier's books explain it just a little complex, but maybe it isn't. All right. When we die, the psyche is dissolving, all the information is being absorbed, the spirit moves into what is called the beyond, for lack of any other term. Is this a heaven where our relatives are? No. It's really, as far as we're concerned, as far as those of us who are living is concerned, it's a non-place. There's no body there. There are no personalities. There's no rolling green hills where Aunt Ethel and Uncle Herbert are gambling about with the kids who died prematurely and birds and butterflies, angels. That doesn't exist. That is a creation, a long-standing creation that came out of our religions, came out of experiences, quote unquote, where people have, oh, they see a tunnel and a light and all this stuff. This is generally oxygen starvation. So wait a minute, what happened? Well, how could Sylvia or whoever not be channeling the spirits of these people? Well, she's not. At best, if she actually had the capabilities, she could, which is very rare, and I will leave alone whether or not she's capable of it, she could only be picking up the information contained in their storage banks. There's no live being who has come down to Earth or anywhere else and has decided to whisper in her left ear so her mouth can start telling you all this stuff. There are people who are perceptive enough, that is even to a certain degree psychic sensitive enough, to read people, to know what they expect, to have picked up or gleaned information, to feed it back to them. And lo and behold, we now think that they're, Uncle Herbert and Aunt Ethel are chatting right away and telling us, oh, remember that drawer in your dresser where I get you? This is not being in touch with departed people. Personalities cease to exist upon death. Then the spirit or the spirit form, which is in the beyond, in this non-place vibrational etheric field, at the right time, based on certain vibrations and frequencies, is drawn to reincarnate in a new body, in a new family, as a new personality that will have nothing whatsoever to do with the previous personality, because reincarnation is for the sake of evolution, not for being, I'm going to be Joe in my next life and in the one after because I like being Joe in this one. That's how we all are. We identify with these personalities. But if we've had other lifetimes, how come there's no, in my case, where was Michael Horn 100 years ago? Well, there's no evidence that he was around. Andrew, can you find Andrew, the same Andrew back in history? No, because that isn't the way it works. We've received information about reincarnation, the so-called afterlife, all this stuff from people who don't know crap. They simply don't. They've picked it up from other people. They picked it up from religions or cults, belief systems, from their own imagination, and they've convinced themselves that, well, that's got to be the real thing. This is what Meier and the Plejaren and the prophets of old have fought against. for 13,500 years. The fact that the people of earth will allow themselves to be so badly misled by cults, religions, beliefs, take on absolutely irrational teachings, and will prosecute wars and crucify and destroy people who don't believe these things. This is a huge reason for these final contacts for a prophet for the new time. The final prophet for these times. It's a pretty thankless job when they're alive, usually. And this is the case with Meier. And all this other stuff, there's nothing there. They can't do what they claim. People can be sensitive enough. I have done psychic readings on people just because there was enough present that I could sense about them, and they thought I was some genius. It was just all there. I even gave I told a woman her exact birthday. She forgot that she'd left her wallet lying out for a couple minutes at this event somewhere where she was paying for something. I said, December 16th, 1953. Oh my God, that's exactly right. I said, yes, I know. I went into a deep state to get that information. Speaking of which, that would be Texas you were born in, right? Oh my gosh, Texas. Yes. How'd you know that? Well, I have this gift. I pay attention when someone leaves their license lying around. So we've got to get out of this gullibility and being labile, gullible, willing pawns manipulated by quacks who just have just enough psychotic, sociopathic, sharp energy to manipulate people. That's it's just an opinion.
Fair enough. Now, two of the plagiarism that Billy Meier has communicated with. I want to get into what the real deal is behind them, because people are going to have a field day with some of the other things people have said. One is Ta, the other was Emmanuel. Now, Billy Meier has said that Emmanuel, a son of a Pleiadian woman begotten by a Pleiadian man begotten by an extraterrestrial, and an Earth woman named Mary. And the story of Jesus Christ is a twisted version on Emmanuel. And although Akashic Records J. Andrew Bartz says the entity we know of is Jesus Christ, I mean, people that like David Icke and Jordan Maxwell, who said Jesus never existed, it's just a phony representation of the sun moving across the zodiac. Well, no, that's not really the case. He did exist, but his story has been twisted, Andrew Bartz said, but he did not say anything about the Emmanuel entity that Billy Meier talks about. He just said Christ was a solar being, and his story has been twisted. Now, that's one thing. Now, the entity known as Ta, Robert Stanley. A lot of people flat out disagree with Robert Stanley's claim that the entity of the Anunnaki known as Enki, Enlil's brother, is evil. Anybody who studies Sitchin's work would think of Enlil as the evil one and Enki as the benevolent one who cares for humanity. Robert Stanley actually asserts that Enki does not have such good intentions, and he also said that the entity known as Ta that Billy Meier communicates with is Enki, and he bases that, among other things, on the fact that the Ta in ancient Egyptian mythology is the Enki, just in another part of the world. That's Ta is the Egyptian Enki. But I'm thinking you're taking this way out of context. I mean, there's a lot of ETs that look like old men with beards, and you're thinking, okay, he looks like Enki. That doesn't mean he is.
Well, wait. Which would you like me to take first, Emmanuel or Ptah Enki thing?
Let's do the Emmanuel thing first.
Okay. First of all, when people say, well, Jesus Christ was real, but wait a minute, where's the historical evidence for Jesus Christ? Now, this was arguably the most important human being in, modern and pre-modern times. We go back 2,000 years. This is the most important human being who walked the face of the planet. You've got millions of people praying to and believing in, and yet there isn't one historical biography of anybody named Jesus Christ who ever walked the earth. Not one. Now, it's made all the more distressing by the fact that at the time this man, whoever he was, existed, there were about 60 biographers living in the overall area in the Middle East where Jesus Christ was supposedly trotting around and walking on water and delivering bread and loaves to people. So what could possibly be the truth? Well, We do know that in the Old Testament, 7:14, Isaiah, he says one time, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. Then in the New Testament, I think it is Matthew 1:23, after he goes through a whole bunch of stuff about this lovely Jesus Christ guy is going to be showing up, he says, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. So when in 1990, the first English translation of the book called the Talmud Emmanuel is published in, as I say, in English, a translation of the German book, first published in I think about 74 by Billy Meier. We can always go into the story of how he found it, but let's just say that Billy Meier is the co-discoverer along with an ex-Greek Orthodox priest in an ancient tomb on the outskirts of Jerusalem. They claim to have been led there by the Pleiaren telepathically. And in this tomb, underneath the many stones that were, flat stones on the floor of the tomb, when they unearthed the stones, they finally found resin-encrusted, animal skin-wrapped scrolls written in Aramaic, which happened to be a language that Isa Rashid, the Greek Orthodox priest, also could read, along with his native language, a Middle Eastern language, and he also read and wrote German. He was entrusted with the scrolls, and he sent a portion of them to Meier in Switzerland that he was able to translate before he was on the run for his life with the scrolls. I'll leave it there for the moment. So when these scrolls are translated subsequently into English and come out in about 1990, they attract the attention of a professor named James Deardorff at Oregon State University. He was a professor, I believe, of both meteorology, scientist, and of comparative religions. And he saw this and he said, well, it looks like another Bible hoax to me. Let me add it. A year or two later, he comes out with a book called Celestial Teachings. And in this book, sentence by sentence, he compares the book of Matthew and the Talmud. And his overall conclusion, just to come to the point, is the Talmud Emmanuel is the original upon which the book of Matthew is based. It resolves over 325 inconsistencies in the book of Matthew, 150 of which were never really talked about until after the Talmud was published. And he goes into sentence by sentence, word by word comparisons, and that book, the Talmud Emmanuel, is now, of course, available in German and English in one book. And it's very detailed, lots of histories about the Middle East, who Emmanuel was, lots and lots of stuff, including clarifying that he was fathered by a Pleiaren, not a Pleiadian, they don't exist, he wouldn't have been here, a Pleiaren named Gabriel and an earth woman named Mary, who was part of had genetic, some ET genetics in her lineage from earlier stuff. We don't go into that much, but that's how she was fathered, the old-fashioned way. She certainly was no Woygen, as people would have us believe. He was prepared for the crucifixion, which they also knew in advance would take place. He was mentored by the Pleiaren of the time. Gabriel was one of the Pleiaren, and there was, I think, a spell or something was the god of the time, the Pleiaren, who was acting as a god at that time. And remember, he has all this missing time, years of which, in which he was actually in India learning from meditation masters and scribes and people who had many of the old documents still. So he was taught how to control his bodily functions well enough so that when this event occurred, he would appear to be dead, but would be able to survive it so that he could carry on his mission, which would then later be in India, which is connected to something I mentioned earlier, which is that photograph of this cross in the sky in India when Billy Meier is wandering around learning Buddhism and all the rest of this. All of this stuff is interconnected for reasons connected to this whole mission that goes back thousands of years and has nothing to do with an imaginary, perfect wasp on a stick guy who floats up to heaven after he's resurrects himself from the dead. And No, he had been brought back. He had been assisted by healers from India who were in that tomb after he was brought down from the cross in a state of near death. He wasn't dead. And when he and his mother and his brother Thomas and his, actually, I think like a half sister, Mary Magdalene, who was not his lover, she was a disciple. There were actually 17 female disciples, more than men. When she and a few other people traveled post-crucifixion to other countries, including Afghanistan and all, Pakistan, where Mary, the mother of Emmanuel, did die and was buried. Subsequently, actually, I think finally buried maybe in Srinagar, India. He ends up in India. He marries an Indian woman when he's about 48 years of age. He has, according to the Talmud, numerous descendants, a son named Joseph, who's entrusted with the scrolls that Judas, who had been a confidant and friend, not a betrayer. There was a similarly named son of a Pharisee who was the real betrayer of Emmanuel and who did hang himself, but it wasn't Judas. It was a man named Judah Iscariot, and Judas Iscariot was the true scribe. This is stuff you're not going to get from religion or from channels, and you don't have to believe it. You can read and go through every bit of it and start thinking your way through. When you start to say, well, wait a minute, this makes more sense here. The guy doesn't die and float up to heaven and all that. That isn't real life. So he's buried in Srinagar, India. He died when he was about, I think, roughly 110. There's a tomb there and everything. But you've got crazy, Christian religions and Buddhism and Catholicism and Christian, all this, everybody vying for power. They're going to tell you it's the sole truth, but they've got only myths and stories, no logic to any of it ever. And this holds true for Judaism and for Islam, which was badly falsified on the true teaching of another true prophet named Muhammad, who never married 9-year-old girls and who was a liberator of women, not someone who married children. But all of this stuff has been so falsified, and none of the people that are channeling it, all they'll do is they'll take this information if they get a hold of it, and they'll make mumbo jumbo out of it and pretend that it's coming from them. So just watch out in case your Gosia or anybody else suddenly is channeling some information she didn't know before. Again, there's nothing to believe here. This is the difference. Thousands of pages of information that you can go through and start thinking through, and evidence that'll validate that the guy is still really in touch with people who don't come from our world. What else do we want? I know people are busy all the time taking selfies and watching fantasy shows and playing games, but maybe real life really is more interesting than that.
Fair enough. And the thing about Ta and Robert Stanley's claim that it's just Enki masquerading as something else.
Okay, here's your Enki whole thing. Now, you have to realize that all this interest in the Anunnaki and Enki and Eldiel and all that really come from a guy named Zecharia Sitchin. I knew him a little. I knew a guy who worked with him too back in the 80s, 90s. Zecharia Sitchin, according to Meier and the Plejaren, got a lot of stuff badly screwed up because he didn't really translate things accurately. He didn't know what he was talking about. So here's where the difference is to start with. Nibiru is never going to be an inhabited planet because it's an uninhabited comet that comes around periodically and produces its effects in the sky and to whatever degree astrologically and all that stuff. There's nobody living on the thing, and there never was. And the gods of the Sumerians, who were real extraterrestrials, didn't come from that comet. In fact, the real gods of the Sumerians came from the Syrian star system long ago, and their true history is older than what we know. And they did not have slaves mining gold so they could throw it up in the air to protect the frigging atmosphere. There is really no evidence for that. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what people see and read and all that. Were there statues discovered from Sumerian times? Absolutely. Was there evidence of Egypt? Yes. The Sumerians were an advanced, peace-loving people who had mathematics and buildings and all this stuff and their mentors were extraterrestrial humans, Syrians and all, but they got run out of town by more aggressive human beings on Earth. They kind of got wiped out or dissipated and all. This Enki Enlil Ptah thing, Ptah did have an ancestor during those early Egyptian times. This Ptah says, yes, I had an ancestor then at that time, and this name Ptah really has no other existing person other than himself at this time. It's not used by anybody in all of these extraterrestrial worlds. There's information about that. So when people start talking about the Enlil and Enki thing and Ptah, as if they know what they're talking, as if it's fact. They can't prove it's fact. Now they can say, well, you can't prove that this Ptah. I'll say, fair enough. Let's reason through and find out what we've learned that is factually accurate. And would we say, not that we believe what the extraterrestrials, allegedly extraterrestrials, are telling us about other things that we can't prove, but would we have any reason to consider their information? And might we think it might turn out to be accurate as opposed to inaccurate? You don't have to believe it. You can say, well, I trust the source, but I'll wait until there's, sure, that's fair enough. But we shouldn't ever, in my opinion, refer to these sources who think that they're great scholars of stuff and they're based on things that were wrong to start with. They don't have the right histories. They don't have the right time periods. They just don't have it, but they're running half-baked. I bought Sitchin's book, The 12th Planet, Stairway to Heaven, with all that stuff. I was fascinated by it. And that was before I was reading the Meier material and then going, well, wait a minute, this is a whole different thing, isn't it? So this is where, if we want the truth, we go and we start carefully vetting and comparing. Let's be fair here. Compare it. What does Meier have? What does the other sources have? And where is their evidence? Not their stories. Where's their evidence that they've gotten their information from any so-called extraterrestrials, or that their interpretation of archaeological artifacts is correct indeed? This is where people have to learn to think and be diligent. I wasn't trained to do this. I learned it from studying the Meier material and learned it well enough that I have military people, aerospace people, legal people, and all that who endorse my work as a contribution to the overall research and investigation done by wonderful people, also well before me, who established that the case was real before I could contribute to it. And other people can find this out and do it for themselves.
Okay, and I can't resist but asking you about what Billy Meier has to say about James Gilliland and the things on his East City Ranch. I have been there and I've seen the UFOs and I had a good time. And unfortunately, I missed the talk that James did about his take on what Billy Meier says. So I regret missing out. I did, but I did. I wasn't there. So what do you have to say about what Billy Meier says about it?
Absolutely. Well, UFO sightings are no big deal since most all of this, including Gilliland's, are secret military. I've had a number of UFO sightings, only one do I know for sure is ET, and the other two that I think are based on a couple things. Okay. In 2004, I was in San Francisco at an international, it was like a Whole Life Expo, I think it was. I forget the name of the place, but I would know it if I hear it because I was there in 2004, wandering around. I had my own DVD out, just had been put out in March, and there was James Gilliland. He somehow knew who I was, and he called me over and he said, you represent Billy Meier? Yeah, well, he says, look, I want to give you this video of my, video of the UFOs that I see. These are the contacts I'm having, and I would like you to get Billy Meier's opinion on it. Now, Gilliland has to admit this because this is absolutely factual. It's even in the contact reports published by Meier. Why? Okay, for this reason. I said, sure, I'll be glad to do that. And I went to Switzerland shortly thereafter. And I gave this videotape to Billy, and I said, Billy, this is a guy named James Gilliland in America, claims he's, filming extraterrestrial UFOs. He has contacts. He's got this phenomenon going on. If you get the chance, would you show it to the player? And he said, okay, yeah. Well, I expected maybe in a couple months I might hear an answer. This was, I believe, on a Tuesday, 2004 in May. And on Friday, Billy came in the kitchen. He said, I want to tell you about your video. I said, yeah. He says, yeah, come in the office, sit down here. This is where Pata and I were sitting. We watched this video. I said, yes. He said, okay, Pata came last night because he usually will have the visit oftentimes on a Thursday night. Not always, but when they come, for some of these face-to-faces, it's on a Thursday night. He said he pointed out a couple interesting things. First of all, these objects you're seeing here, this is not extraterrestrial. These are American secret military craft developed at Area 51. They fly around, and James Gilliland thinks this is from outer space. And here in this video where James Gilliland opens his shirt and he shows like some burn kind of a mark on his body, what Pata said was, this is an effect that James Gilliland created from his own subconscious of burning himself to try to prove something, to try to make himself important. But this is, no extraterrestrials are involved, and they're not burning his body and anything else. So, he gave a few more general details about this, and no, nothing here has any connection to ETs. Okay, so I came back and I emailed James Gilliland. I said, well, you asked, and here, remember, James Gilliland asked for Billy's opinion. Billy didn't ask for James Gilliland's opinion. And at that point, as soon as I sent him that, everything started to hit the fan. Billy's a false prophet. He's this and that about God. I mean, we never talk about imaginary gods and all that stuff. And Billy's lying, and these are really, so I would write to him and say, James, if you have a paragraph, even a sentence of anything that's important, unique communication from your so-called contacts, send it to me so I can at least, see that you're trying to stand up for something you think is. He never could, because he's not in contact with anything. And that's certainly not reality. A lot of people have gone there. As I said, I've had 7 UFO sightings. People see, this is lights in the sky. And James Gilliland is not the sharpest tool in the shed. And he can't give you a sentence of anything coherent. He babbles about gods and prophecies and stuff. So I'm not picking up. James isn't a bad guy. I mean, he might have smoked too much substances and did things to alter his thinking capacities, but he got lost here because he's basically, to a certain degree, a mind control subject, like many people, like Corey Goode, Stuart Emery. Corey Goode is a self-admitted mind control experiment. All these people are messed with, or simply delusional under their own power. And then, they babble on, and you ask good questions here, Andrew, because you don't have to take this perspective as real. But if people want to think through, they go, wait a minute. Here's Billy Meier, hundreds of the photos and films, and all these experts analyze. Where's James Gilliland's analysis? Here's a light in the sky. Well, that's nice. Nothing. Where are the people who are channeling? Where's their photos or evidence or metal sample? Nothing. So we go, okay, if we're going to be fair, honest, and intelligent, we're going to put it to these tests. Or we can go on, following these people who are glad to waste our time, in some cases take our money, and muck up our brains with gobbledygook. Anyway, that's if James Gilliland is listening. To this day, he won't be able to send one coherent sentence of anything of extraterrestrial origin.
Well, okay, I don't really see him as a kind of guy that really would want to get high to get delusional. He actually has a very strict policy, and he said no alcohol or drugs because he has a feeling it would allow for entities to sabotage people and ruin the experience. So,
right. Well, that's fine, but he's not. It's not that he wants to mislead people. He is being played. He's a mind control experiment. He's led to believe that these are extraterrestrials. They're not. There's no evidence of it. Simply no evidence. And these could happen yet. Daytime sightings could happen, but I don't think they've got anything clear. Where's the ship that's going to come over, where he's going to be able to be within 50 feet or 14 feet like Meier and take nice clear photos? It's not going to happen. It's not real. It's mind control. It's the military playing games with. Maybe he's right. Maybe there's no substance there now. Maybe he did enough stuff to get goofy. I don't know, but he's not thinking clearly.
Okay, another person who may not have been thinking clearly was Billy Meier's skeptical wife. I seem to recall her once saying, among other things, that she thought the UFO that Billy claims was a pleasure and craft was a lid from a trash can, among other
Sure.
things that she said. What was her problem? What was
Yeah.
that all
Well,
about?
her first problem is that she spent a half hour, in addition to passing lie detector tests with 16 other people, authenticating all of Billy's, evidence and what they've seen and talked about. In addition to that, she does a half-hour interview in German, which has been translated. They're working on finishing translation, endorsing the truth of Billy's contacts, seeing the ETs herself, attesting to the fact that the children have seen the ships, and all of that good stuff, apart from the fact that the thing she called a trash can lid has been independently analyzed. Anybody can read that 74-page analysis and realize that's a big object, and you can use the recommended software. You can do the analysis yourself. But they are just like many other human beings on Earth. They came to a parting of ways. They had a contentious time because, in fairness to her, with Billy's contacts going on for so long and all these people from all over the world marching uninvited through their homes and stealing stuff and everything else, she was getting a little tired of that, and they had their own issues. And so she and he divorce. And then there's a skeptic from Belgium named, I think it's Luc Bergin, who decides to get in touch with her and start to convince her that it's all a hoax. And they found out when they did some research, when Meier people, suddenly her bank account inflated considerably after the divorce. And then the attacks started, and the attacks also came from a mental case, a guy named Cal Korff, who is a certified mental case, who I took on as well years ago, and he'll be back out with a new book attacking things soon. It's just like, poor guy. Okay. Same thing. He's working with this guy named Stephen Cambion, and they are just on this big, vendetta against Wendell Stevens in the Meier case. People who have real mental issues. So that's another story. But she, in her own words, and we will have the translation of the video. It'll be up on my blog, on YouTube, and all this stuff soon enough. Hopefully soon enough. And you'll hear her in her own words telling how truthful he is. So this is real life. It's messy. There are no perfect space brothers. There's no perfect prophets. It's just real life. And we have to work our way through it. That's our task here on Earth. We're not supposed to believe anything. Nothing. We have to find out. Is it true? Is it not, according to our own thinking?
Okay, we've only got about 10 minutes to go. A couple things. We've already touched on the American Civil War as well. Not just America, but the rest of the world is said to be in for some great things. The word on the street, among other things, is this whole virus civilization shutdown is really just a cover-up to conceal the fact that behind the scenes, all the good guys and white hats and even the good ETs that are fighting for humanity's future to be a good future are shutting down the bankers and the Illuminati Brotherhood bloodlines and all the rest of them, controlling humanity for years. And when this whole thing is said and done, it may take a few years to put Humpty Dumpty back together again after he falls apart, which may be 2024 and onward after that eclipse I mentioned earlier. But we are supposed to, among other things, have a currency reset where we go to a gold-backed currency where money actually has intrinsic value, and that is supposed to, the word on the street, according to some people like Tolek, I know you don't seem to believe him, but he has said that his contacts anyway told him that currency reset will kickstart a 10 to 15-year period where humanity will be able to transition to no money at all, where all the technology that's been suppressed, which will enable all 7 to 9 billion people. You say it's 9 billion. I thought it was not even at 8 billion yet, but maybe you can explain that. But anyhow, all the technology that's going to be released is going to allow for us to be able to quit our 9-to-5 jobs and get everything we need and then some. And hopefully people won't become lazy, apathetic couch potatoes and also try to do their part to make sure everything works out well. And that's my biggest concern about some people saying that this is going to cause a currency reset and the restructuring of society. People may become lazy, think we don't have to do anything because they're going to come and save us. But anyway, if there is some truth to that, does Billy Meier have anything to say about that and what is in store for the rest of the world, and how, besides America, Also, something about Vladimir Putin I've heard being like maybe he's had a recent Valiant Thorpe type meeting shortly after he gave Edward Snowden asylum, where ETs contacted him and say, "Look, we know you've been threatened about keeping Snowden. We're here to protect you. Don't worry. You are going to be the world leader who is going to be able to like usher in the charge of a new non-control system dominated society." And since then, Putin seems to have had a little bit of a change of heart. Hope he may still have a few dark things, but it seems like he seems to be the
Okay.
politician that's been switched around a
Well,
bit. Do you have anything to say about that?
oh yeah, we have plenty to say. And let me first start, since there's a lot there. That whole narrative, apart from whatever our friendly guy Toltec or whatever he calls himself is coming up with, is also a derivative of the utter disinformation and putrid nonsense from the QAnon faction, which is a huge disinformation operation. And which, of course, if you ever examine all this stuff, you go, gee, why didn't that happen? Why didn't that happen? Oh, Trump, the master, the genius. Oh, really? No, it's a lovely, it's like the UFO world in that it gets people who have a certain kind of a conspiratorial mindset to follow utter nonsense and think that they're in on a great plan and a special thing, and what they're in on ends as soon as their computer goes off because they're connected to nothing. So in 2006, when I visited in Switzerland with Billy in May of 2006, I asked him one day this question: Billy, fundamentally, was the Iraq war about oil? He turned to me and he said this, I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty damn close. No, he said, fundamentally, it's about your dollar. If things go a certain way, you may as well roll cigarettes with your paper money. I put a video up later when I got back from Switzerland. It's still up on YouTube, 2006, and I include it in my blog because in predictions, meaning these will come about, from 2017, Meier writes a lot about the financial times, the coming things, and he even says things like in the whole economy, the wages of the employed will drastically decrease and provoke enormous financial problems in all population strata of the working world, so that also the social collective is damaged, shall collapse, and everywhere a rapid rise in criminality shall also engender enormous problems. He goes on to talk about speculators bringing about a global financial and economic crisis of proportions never seen before. The whole financial economy falls into terrible straits and much trouble because there will be a great scarcity of commodities. Even in the USA, listen to this, the people will be dispossessed as a consequence of the global financial crisis, which shall become a pretext for deploying the military and police forces against the angry and partly heavily armed population. The whole financial system world over will be overturned. So here's what they're saying. Forget this nonsense about, well, the COVID thing is really just a phony thing. There are millions, tens of millions of people now sick with this disease. There are many, many hundreds of thousands into millions sick already, and many, many, many more to come. This is not, oh, it's the evil global elite. Now, could Bill Gates be the devil incarnate and he wants to create a vaccine with biochip? It could be, but it's not the thing I would worry about right now. I would worry about things like food and shelter, perhaps defense systems and water, and having those things that will help you to survive as this whole farce comes tumbling down, no matter which of the morons win the election in November. I wouldn't worry about the evil elite. Yeah, they're going to try to destroy people. There will actually be genetically engineered DNA attacking weapons and pandemics and all this stuff. But right now, this thing isn't it. That's coming because they know there are too many people on the planet and they would like to get rid of a bunch of them. I never believed that was so, but apparently it is. So instead of the people pretending like Toltec, whatever, that they're getting messages from the Andromeda Council when they can't tell their ass from their elbow, maybe we start to read these specific predictions, which cover so much stuff, some of which has already happened since Billy published them. Yeah, how about this? The USA and the rulers of the USA shall be imperiled in the future in many ways, which arise from both governmental and non-governmental, anti-government and anti-state actor, as well as from large parts of the population of the U.S. This is telling you what's happening right now. The lunatics on the left and the lunatics on the right, many are anti-government and anti-this and anti-that. So the rulers of the country, the rulers of the USA, and the citizens will be imperiled. That's underway. I mean, folks, the handwriting couldn't be any clearer. You don't have to guess mystical messages from non-existent ETs and entities who don't exist and therefore can't tell anybody anything. All you can get at best are people like these phony channels and all who are going to go through Meier's information or read the news or whatever and make up stuff so they can lead you down a pointless path. A pointless path. Believe me, read the truth, go through it, and start to think and protect yourself for what's coming, what's upon us even right now.
Okay, hope you didn't. I hope you gave people a nice kick in the pants, I should say, with saying that. So that being said, I guess I'll bring this to a close. But you can get anything you like in the last couple minutes here. Please get out your websites, your contact info, maybe some future meetups. It's hard to say where you're going to be or where any's going to be because every conference is being canceled now.
Sure.
But anyhow, get that out, and then we'll call this a night, and I will try to upload this to YouTube and Cause.tv by midnight tomorrow, and I'll send you a link after I do.
Please send me links because my people want to hear this too. People that are interested in the Meier material and the blog and all that. So here, let me answer that. First of all, I very much appreciate this interview because you're asking and bringing up points and questions about things that certainly a lot of your listeners and others are interested in, and they want to know the truth, and they follow this or they follow that. So we gave another perspective tonight, and people are free to decide for themselves. As a matter of fact, any of your listeners who simply refer to this show, give your name or the name of the show or heard me on, if they send me their email address, I will send them a free download of that film that I think you were referring to, The Silent Revolution of Truth, probably the best UFO film ever made now when we look at it in retrospect with all of Meier's stuff. Send it to them free. No obligation. They won't be badgered to buy anything. And then anything, if they have questions or challenges, they're free to email me as well. So that's free to your listeners, and I will be glad to answer as best I can, time permitting. I will have a free webinar coming up. I think it's on September 21st. It's right around there. It's on my blog, listed on one of my blogs. I will be promoting it from here on just about every blog, and people will be free to sign up and join us for that one as well. So theyflyblog.com and theyfly.com. Find me, ask for a free film, and I hope they are grateful to you for bringing forward this whole other point of view that I'm sure contradicts many things people believe, but we have no beliefs. We only have this evidence and information, and people should check it out if they want to. So I am grateful for your time.
I'm grateful for your time too. By the way, that documentary that you said you'll send people for free, I think it can still be accessed on the UFO TV On Demand YouTube channel, which doesn't upload documentaries anymore, but it did. Right. I'll upload a lot of them back in the day, and that I believe is where I found it, and I think it can still be found on there if people
Perfect
want to
if it can. If they get that one, and they can download that one for free, I'll send them another one, a different one. How's that?
And that's not the only Billy Meier documentary on that channel, so right. Definitely a channel worth checking out. So thank you for your time. I'll send you this link when I get it uploaded to YouTube, hopefully by midnight tomorrow. I promise that, but sometimes I've accidentally broken my promise a few times on that. I'll try not to with you, so just bear with me, and I'll get it up as soon as I can. Take care, and enjoy the rest of your trek throughout infinite consciousness and anything that Billy Meier gives for as long as he may have on this earth. He's 83 years old now, but he's, I'm sure, still got some time to go, because Swiss people, that environment in Switzerland, you have to think they're going to live long lives in that.
He's actually 167. We'll go into that at another time.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Sure. He said that. All right, take care now.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.